Imagine, just for a second, that the Earth we're walking on isn't just a giant static rock. Imagine it's a living, breathing organism. Now take that a step further. What if this massive planetary body is actually aging, like actively dying of old age? Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into a genuinely startling concept from ancient prophetic writings, specifically the visions of 2 Ezra. We're going to explore a world where the escalating chaos of human history isn't just a string of bad luck. It's actually the literal biological symptoms of a dying planet.
Right off the bat, the text hits us with this powerful metaphor. Ezra is told point blank that the world hasteth fast to pass away. The text describes the world as a patient that has entirely lost his youth and is starting to wax old. You know, just like a human body gets frail, becomes more prone to disease, and loses its energy as it ages, the author of 2 Ezra argues the earth itself is suffering the exact same inescapable weaknesses of old age. And as it gets weaker through age, a very specific, terrifying set of symptoms begins to show up.
So, here is how we're going to break this diagnosis down today. First, we'll look at how the world waxes old. Then, the resulting moral and social decay. Third, the rise of a false messiah. Fourth, the actual corruption of nature. And finally, we'll look at the root cause, the brain of evil seed.
Starting with Section 1, the world waxes old. Before we really get into the weeds, it's crucial to know where these ideas actually come from. These visions are preserved in the Ethiopian apocrypha. We're talking about books like 2 Ezra's, 3 Maccabean, and the Books of Enoch. These are texts that didn't make it into traditional Protestant canons, but were fiercely protected in places like Ethiopia. They give us an incredible window into how ancient minds processed existential threats. They definitely didn't see history as this continuous upward climb of human progress. To them, it was a slow, agonizing descent from original perfection. The contrast they draw is absolutely fascinating. According to 2 Ezra, those born in the strength of youth are built one way, but those born in the time of age, when the earth's proverbial womb is failing, are fundamentally different. The text tells us that as the world becomes weaker through age, the more that evils shall increase upon them that dwell therein. The apocryphal writings of Enoch back this up entirely, predicting that violence will just continually increase on the earth and that unrighteousness will eventually take over in a twofold degree. The world is outwardly corrupted, basically breaking down from compounding illnesses as its clock runs out. Moving right along to Section 2, moral and social decay. Now let this one sink in. The texts predict a time when the very fabric of society just completely unravels. These latter days are marked by people who utterly corrupt themselves, completely turning their backs on divine commandments. This gets at a really deep, terrifying fear that human connection will just evaporate into brutal, survivalist hostility. We're talking about a time of such panic and lack of resources that a man will have, quote, no pity upon his neighbor, and will instead destroy their houses with a sword. The really crucial takeaway here is how incredibly fast this moral decay snowballs. The texts give us this deeply unsettling checklist of societal collapse, warning that friends shall destroy one another. Basic structures fall apart, kings are ignored, and sedition just takes over. And honestly, the most heartbreaking detail comes from Enoch, which says the destitute will actually abandon their own suckling children. They completely lose pity for their loved ones. Human reasoning becomes lawless, driven by pure arrogance. Basically, the mind of humanity is rotting right alongside the aging planet. Which brings us to Section 3, Rise of the False Messiah. The visions in 3 Maccabean introduce a very specific antagonist into this dying world, a false messiah predicted to be born in a later era. This figure is essentially the ultimate enemy of truth. He steps in right when the world is at its weakest and most chaotic, and orchestrates this massive spiritual misdirection. His entire goal is to actively change human reasoning, pulling people completely away from the law. Looking at these ancient records, we see this figure referred to as the Diabolos child. It's an entity of just absolute total arrogance, who openly brags about pulling humanity off the right path. But what's really wild is how he does it. It's not through standard military warfare. He uses deep psychological and material manipulation. His primary weapons? Material obsession and vanity. The text is super explicit about his toolkit. He uses the world's money and endless wealth, shining Hindiki jewels of silver and gold, fine linens and silks. He even sparks jealousy using attractive daughters. And if flooding the world with materialism wasn't enough, he rolls out counterfeit miracles. He lodges false signs in the stars, the clouds, the fire, even manipulating the cries of wild beasts. It's an all-out assault designed so that those who think they're wise will be utterly misled, blinded by luxury and fake wonders. All right, Section 4, the corruption of nature. So, alongside this massive deception, the text warns that the land itself will become barren of faith, and the way of truth will be completely hidden from anyone living on earth. But here's the twist: this spiritual barrenness actually physically manifests. The texts describe a world that is literally set in darkness, where the inhabitants are completely without light. It's as if the moral corruption of humanity is a literal contagion infecting the soil of the earth.
And that leads to a terrifying planetary breakdown. According to these texts, in the days of the sinners, the years themselves will be shortened, rain is withheld, the actual mechanics of nature start glitching out, the sun suddenly shines in the middle of the night, the moon shows up 3 times a day, you've got salt waters infecting sweet rivers, the fruits of the earth become backward and fail to grow when they're supposed to. Even wild beasts just abandon their natural habitats. It's total environmental rebellion, proving that this disease of the latter days isn't just a human issue, it's infected the fundamental code of nature.
Finally, let's look at section 5, the grain of evil seed.
This is where the author of 2 Ezra makes a massive conceptual leap. We have to look at the why. The world isn't just randomly falling apart for no reason, it's simply growing the crop that was planted at the very dawn of humanity. The text explains that a grain of evil seed was sown in the heart of Adam from the very beginning. And while the sources do acknowledge that man's heart was only evil continually, way back in the ancient days of Noah, they heavily emphasize that this seed keeps growing, and this vast fruit of wickedness will increase even further in the times to come.
Ezra himself is totally overwhelmed by this idea. He actually asks the angelic messenger this desperate question, trying to wrap his head around the sheer scale of the evil that one single ancient seed could produce over thousands of years. I mean, think about it. If an evil seed was planted at the dawn of time, and the world is now old and dying, what does that final harvest actually look like?
The metaphorical answer he gets is just absolutely staggering. The angel tells Ezra to picture the incredible fruit of wickedness this seed has produced. When the innumerable ears of this evil crop are finally cut down, the text suggests the harvest of iniquity is going to be so massive, it completely defies human imagination. It'll fill a threshing floor of an unimaginable size.
And this leads us to the final, incredibly sobering resolution of the text. The world can't be cured of its old age. There's no fountain of youth or reversing the clock for an aging planet. The measure of wickedness has to reach a full, complete measure before the final judgment can happen. The world simply has to reach the absolute end of its biological and spiritual life cycle so that this grand harvest can finally be reaped. Which leaves us with a pretty haunting historical perspective to take away from this explainer. The authors of these ancient apocryphal texts looked at the chaos, the corruption, and the natural disasters of their own era, and they concluded that the world was already dying of old age thousands of years ago. So the provocative question we're left with today is this: if the world was already in its frail twilight years back then, exactly how much closer are we to that final threshing floor today? Something to think about. See you next time.